tech. Welcome, and so glad you could join us as we look into the last sections of that first. I think actually, yeah, we're at the end of Noah here, getting to the end of it. And in fact, it's the last chapter in this particular parsha. So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So just very quick housekeeping. My cursor should be showing Shvi'i. Is that what my cursor is doing? Is it right under Shvi'i? Would someone tell me, please?
Yes.
Good.
Yes,
Okay.
good.
All right. Wonderful. So, but this, let's make sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is, oh no. Gotta go back. Let's go back to the, yeah. Sorry. I should be in the place. Let's see. Yep. I was actually before that. Here we are. All right. So we are in a new chapter. Here we are. Ve'ele toldot b'nei Noach. These are the generations of the descendants of Noah. Shem, Ham, v'Yafet. Shem, Ham, and Yafet. Vayivaldu lahem banim, and sons were born to them achar hamabul, after the flood. Just keep an eye on the verse. Okay, it's interesting here. Bnei Yefet, the sons of Yefet, Gomer Umagog, Gomer, Magog, Umadai, just the names of these places, Yavan. By the way, Yavan, of course, Madai, Medes, right? Yavan is the modern word for Greece, Tuval and Tuval, Umeshech Tiras, and Meshech and Tiras. And you can see that I have a little 7 right here. And the reason why I have that number is that I was trying to do a running total, because according to this particular chapter, the total number of descendants of Noah that divided into the different nations is the number 70. Now, I think that the number 70 is has more symbolic significance than if we were to count all the nations that actually exist in the world scientifically. Again, I think we have to be so careful to have scientific quote expectations of the Torah. You've heard me say this many times now, as opposed to literary truths that are found in the Torah, which go beyond what science tries to tell us, and the information that we have that have more to do with significance. What significance do we have as human beings, which is another iteration of a question of, well, if you want to do it on a personal level, for what purpose was I born? Why did I come into this world? What am I here to accomplish? And ultimately, I think the question, which is, of what significance do I have, especially as an individual? And that all religions, try to answer this question in their own approach. So the number 70, of course, being a round number, has significance to it. And also, it's a multiple of the number 7. And we know that 7 is something that has to do with the creation of this world. That's the first time we encounter it. And so there is some inner connection there. I am simply trying to tease out some literary themes and ideas here. But to tell you the truth, I don't feel like at this point I have a really satisfactory answer to this. But I do know that the number 70 is significant. We just recently celebrated the holiday, the festival of Sukkot, and we know that on the first day of Sukkot you bring 13 bulls. On the second day you bring 12, and there's 7 days of Sukkot. And if my calculations are correct, if you add up the total number of bulls bought during the 7 days of Sukkot, guess what number you're going to come up with? And the reason that is given in the tradition for that number of bulls, the 70 bulls of Sukkot, is that they represent all the nations of the world, which is kind of, I think, interesting theme, you might say, of Sukkot and what it's supposed to represent. And I think that there's sort of certain, maybe even perhaps, could I describe it as messianic themes within that element. And certainly Sukkot is also the the anniversary of Solomon dedicating the temple. Again, the temple, my sense being the conduit by which the divine enters into this world, and so possibly that Sukkot also brings these themes together on a universal kind of level. So, at any rate, that's why you have these little numbers here. Okay. So there were seven, in other words, there were seven sons. If you count the number of names here, you're going to get seven. And I'm going to look here at Rashi, right? The Tiras. And for some reason, Rashi feels he needs to explain what Tiras, in his time at any rate, or what modern quote, quote, nation that was. He says Zoparas, that Tiras is Persia. Persia, present day Iran, right? And the source for that is, our editor has told us that the source for that is in Bereshit Rabbah. I do not believe these parenthetical references actually were from Rashi. I think somebody did some good research and was able to find what the sources were for Rashi's statement. Of course, it's possible, again, I have to ask myself the question, of all the names that we just had, why Davka Paras? By the way, I believe Iranians do consider themselves Aryans, or sort of from that part of a European, as opposed to Asian origins. At any rate, and not Semitic either necessarily. I do not know that Persian, excuse me, or Farsi is a Semitic language. It's more of a European type, or one of the European languages. If I'm speaking wrong, I hope I'll be corrected. At any rate, we know that Persia was very significant in the sense that Cyrus, of course, was a Persian, and he saw to it that the second temple was built. We talked about that in a previous lesson, the significance of that. And that would be, for me, a possible answer as to why Rashi chose the Tiras as to explain that it's referring to Persia. So. Uvnei Gomer. So we're going into, we had Yefet Gomer. Now we've got Gomer, right? The children of Gomer, the next generation, right? Grandchildren. Ashkenaz, we know we talk about Ashkenazi, right, as referring to the European Jewry. Verifat, Vetogarma, and of course you see three. Uvnei Yavan, the descendants of Yavan, or the children of Yavan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kitim, Donanim. So there we got four. Me'ele nifredu iye hagoyim ba'artzotam, and from these separated out the isles of the nations in their lands. Ish lil shono, each a man according to his language, the mishpachotam according to their families, begoyehem amongst their nations. So basically, what are we saying? We're saying, of course, the degree to which these all split up, even though they're from one family, they all have unique and individual qualities, etc. Next, Vnei Cham, the children of Cham, Cush, right? Mitzrayim, Ufut, Uchnaan, right? So we got four there. Uvnei Cush, and the descendants of Cush, breaking it up further, right? Sava, V'chavila, V'savta, V'ra'ama, V'savtecha, right? So we got that. That's five, right? There's that five right here, right? Uvnei Ra'ama, Shava Udadam, and so there's the two there. Okay, so onwards. The Chush, next generation going down here, right? Yalad et Nimrod. Okay, so this is like a little bit of a separation here, because whether you count Nimrod as the beginning of a nation, I did not get to the end of this calculation as to whether Nimrod is going to be counted, and you'll see why. V'chush yalad et Nimrod, hu hechel liyot gibor ba'aretz. Now, this is a sentence that is going to bear quite a bit of interpretation when we get to it. Right here we are, Rashi here, and Tet as well. Right. So what do we mean? Because we haven't, up to this point, we've just been mentioning descendants. We haven't said anything about them, right? So Nimrod, who Hechel, he began, Lihiyot Gibor, literally it means to be a mighty one in the land. And what exactly we mean by a mighty one? So, Lihiyot Gibor, Lahamrid Kol Ha'olam, to cause the entire world to rebel al HaKadosh Baruch Hu, on the Holy One, blessed be He, be'atzat dor ha'aflaga, in the, this is an Eitzah, is to give one advice, right? The generation of the dispersion. So basically, Nimrod, we would say, is going to be in charge of the Tower of Babel, right? Of the Tower of Babel, which was the cause of the dispersion, right? So, and here's in his word, you see Mered, right? Mered, Nimrod, the one he was called, the name. But there's going to be a discussion actually as to what his real name was. That's later on. When we have the four kings, this is later on in the chapter, the next chapter in Lech Lecha, where there's that chapter about the four kings that went on a campaign and defeated five kings, the king of Sodom, Amorah, Admah, Tzvoyim, and Soar, and with Abraham, and there's a relationship to Abraham. There are many Agadatas, there are many legends that involve Nimrod, because Nimrod is the direct opposite of Abraham. Abraham, of course, tried to bring people to understand the relationship of human beings to the divine, and Nimrod was just the opposite. And so there are legends about Nimrod having a dispute with Abraham, and Abraham besting Nimrod in the dispute, but Nimrod was the king, and Nimrod had Abraham cast into the fiery furnace. That reference, even though we know the story of the fiery furnace is in the book of Daniel, nevertheless, we say how Abraham came from Ur Kasdim, and Ur, of course, is fire, right? So there's this allusion to this particular midrash and Agadah about Abraham and Nimrod. And again, symbolically, what does it mean, right? And the degree to which those who would deny the existence of a divine, being to whom we owe allegiance, is the hatred with which those people may treat people who do believe in the divine being, and of course, possibly, if you're following me, even anti-Semitism. What does anti-Semitism really represent on a certain level? So it's been going on for a long time, anti-Semitism. And here, possibly, we're looking at the literary suggestions as to what creates that situation. So, going on to the next verse. We're not finished with Nimrod. Hu haya gibor tzayed lifnei Hashem. This is just supporting the interpretation we're giving here of this story of Nimrod, right? What Nimrod represents. He was a mighty hunter before God, right? In other words, in the presence of God. Al Kain Ye'amer, and for this reason there is a saying, it is said, Kin Nimrod, like Nimrod, Gibor Tzayed, a mighty hunter, Ifnei Hashem, we use that expression. So I suppose we are talking here about referring to someone who tries to talk to people and deny any sense of divine obligation, right? That there's something more that we are owed to as human beings, etc., etc. We can, of course, spend a lot of time teasing out what exactly what are all the implications that are included if you do believe that there is a divine creator, as opposed to if you deny it, okay, and what that suggests. So, again, Rashi, Gibor Tzayed, a mighty hunter. Tzad da'atan, right, shel briot. He would entrap the minds, right, the thoughts of the people, of creatures, meaning human beings, right, the various people. He would use arguments and trap them with his mouth, right, befiv, with his mouth. So there's different ways of hunting, right? Normally, of course, we always think of hunting with different kinds of instruments, etc. But you can also hunt with your mouth, meaning you can trap people. And trapping, of course, I suspect still is and was to a great extent the way in which hunting was done. And you can entrap people with, in their minds. Okay. So, Umata'an, and he would mislead them, Nimrod Bamakom, to rebel against, literally, of course, it means the place, but it means, of course, the way I would probably try to translate it is the ultimate existent one. Lifnei Hashem, son, before God, in the presence of God. Mitkavein, he intended. In other words, he knew exactly what he was doing. He would speak of God. He himself sensed that there was some ultimate creator, right? But he intentionally did this. Lahaknito. He intentionally provoked God al panav in his presence. He did things to provoke God. Al ken ye'amer, and for this reason it is said, I'll call Adam about any person, right, regarding any man, Marshia ba'azut panim, who acts wickedly, or in fact, Marshia is a hifil form. So, in other words, cause wickedness, someone who, or encourages people to act wickedly. But azut panim means basically impudence, right? Arrogance with impudence. Yodea Ribono, he knows his master, he's aware that God exists. Umitkaven limrodbo, and he has every intention of rebelling against him. Yomar, or Ye'amer, possibly, it is said, this particular individual, can Nimrod, just like Nimrod, Gibor Tzayed, and this is a reference to Bereshit Rabbah, a wonderful and great midrash that actually I am studying. I have on Wednesday evenings a class where we study Bereshit Rabbah, and actually we're on Lech Lecha right now. That's what we're working on right now. Okay. One more verse. Utehi Reshit Mamlachto. We still are not finished with Nimrod. We really have sort of taken a moment to get into this, right? And the beginning of his kingdom, his empire, Bavel, was Babylonia. So again, from a literary standpoint, so much foreshadowing, right? Because who was responsible for the destruction of the first temple? The Babylonians. So we see this, this is just all underscores the literary nature of the Torah, right? Because here we have foreshadowing. The Erech, so other places, Erech, Akkad, V'chalneh, Be'eretz Shin'ar, right? And Erech, Akkad, and Kalneh in the land of Shinar. Let me see if there's anything. Not yet. No Rashi on this as yet. So again, whether we need to count these different places in that 70 nations, right? I would have to go back, and I hope I have an opportunity to do some research on that, just to double check. Going on. Min haaretz, and from this land, the land of Shinar, Hahi, that land, Yatsa Ashur. Interesting. Assyria emerged. So Ashur, again, more foreshadowing, because Assyria was the empire that destroyed the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes of Israel. They are the ones who destroyed it. Vayiven et Nineveh, this is Nimrod, right? He built Nineveh. Ve'et Rehovot Ir, these are towns, right? Cities. Ve'et Kalach and Kalach, these 3 cities going on. I'll do another one here, right? Ve'et Resin, Bein Nineveh uvein Kalach, and the city of Resin between Nineveh and Kalach. Hi ha'ir hagdolah, that was the great city. So, of course, the language is ambiguous, and Rashi is going to tell us which was. I mean, on surface, it sounds like we're talking about Resin, right? That Resin was this huge metropolis on the surface. That's just, I'm going to mark the spot here while we're at it, but I am going to do the Rashi. I just want to make sure I have where we are, where we left off in terms of the verses. Here we are. Okay, and I'm going to also, while I'm at it, put in the bookmark. Let's take a look at the Rashi. Let's see. Does it start up here? Maybe. Okay. So, yes, I went on quite a bit. So, verse 11. Min haaretz, from this land. Kevan shera'a Ashur et banav. This is so interesting, right? Because we know, in terms of foreshadowing, Ashur is the empire at the Syrian Empire at the time. Okay, was the one that overcame and destroyed the 10 northern tribes and basically assimilated them into the empire, and that's why we no longer can identify these lost tribes. We do have 10 lost tribes. Kevan shira'a Ashur et banav, because Ashur saw his sons, Shom'in Nimrod, listening, right, paying attention to Nimrod. They were listening to Nimrod, umordim bamakom, and consequently rebelling against God. Livnot hamigdal, to build the Tower of Babel. Yatsa mitocham, he left them. He went away. God went away from them, etc. So this is, again, interesting. Here we're talking about the empire that basically wiped out the 10 northern tribes. Only Judah and Benjamin, and of course the Kohanim that were living there, the Levites, right, who were living there in Judah and Benjamin, survived. And yet here we are saying something very positive about Assyria. I would also note, please, that the Torah, the script in which the Torah scroll is written, is called Katav Ashurit. It is called the Assyrian script, which is very, very similar, not quite absolutely identical, but almost, right, to this Hebrew that we have for the text, and it's called Assyrian script. And yet that is the nation that destroyed the northern tribes. But I may have mentioned this, probably have already, that it occurs to me that as tragic as this was in terms of destroying the identity of those 10 northern tribes, if they were all assimilated into the Assyrian Empire, I think that perhaps, not that I'm in any position to read the divine mind, but possibly the idea that the entire world's population would actually have Israelite blood in them. So that, and that could be the real intention, the ultimate intention, that humanity, right, that our tradition incorporates this universal yearning of human beings seeing one another as all coming or all related in some way or another, which allows the possibility of people living in harmony and in peace. So it does occur to me that out of something that was so awful and shocking and tragic, that something actually very, very profound could happen in the future. Who knows? So a little bit more. Ha'ir Hagdolah. Remember, we mentioned that we had these 3 cities, and where it said this was the great city. Rashi comes right to the point. He Nineveh. That actually is Nineveh. Nineveh is the great city being mentioned in this verse. How do we know this? Shene'emar, because it states in Jonah chapter 3, Venineveh haita ir gdola lelohim. Remember the city of Nineveh that Jonah went to prophesy against and say it would be destroyed? I think, I don't remember if it was 30 days or 60 days or whatever, right? It's the Haftarah for the afternoon of Yom Kippur. And there it says, it was the great city, Lelohim, before God. Now, the Lelohim, right, could also refer to its rebellious nature. And the reason, I mean, we're talking here, this Elohim is mentioned in Jonah. This Elohim is mentioned here in about Nimrod, right? So while I'm not supposed to do Gzera Shavas, there's this way of interpreting the Torah and the Bible by saying there's a word in this context and there's a similar or the same word in another context. What is the connection between the two? But I am not teaching halacha here. I'm not trying to infer Jewish law and mitzvot. I'm just simply saying from a literary standpoint, right? That the idea, because remember, that's the story about the city that had behaved in such a way that God was ready to destroy it, to absolutely destroy it, just like God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah and those cities, right? The behavior. And Jonah goes and prophesies and lets them know, and oh my heavens, they take him seriously. They take him seriously to a point where from the king down, they decide to change their behavior. And God spares the city. And I think that in knowing all the various literary themes, in other words, we're suggesting that the city of Nineveh, basically the population, was in such rebellion against God, and yet the power of tshuva. So this story of Jonah is about how one can always, even at a point where God is basically determined to destroy it, nevertheless, it says God saw their behavior. God saw that they changed. There's always the possibility of redemption. And on Yom Kippur, it's so important. To what degree do we understand the sanctity of Yom Kippur and what a profound influence it can have if we decide to take the message seriously, that the very existence of life is there. We'll stop right here. I'm going to stop the share and stop the recording.